This video will just speed up your workflow when making materials in Unreal Engine 5. So let's start off with our vectors. So if we hold 1 and click, 2 and click, 3 and click, 4 and click, these will be all your different kinds of vector inputs. And then what you typically do is right click this and then convert to parameter to make a scalar parameter for your material instance. The shortcut for this guy is S and click. So way faster than typing constant and then right clicking and then convert to parameter, just hold S and click and you've got everything you need. The next thing that is super useful is if you hold S and click to make a parameter and you want to rename it, just press F2 to rename. I use this all the time. Now for a vector parameter, just hold V and click and that'll make a vector parameter, and then you can F2 to rename and call this base color, and then this would be your color input for wherever you want. Let's say you wanted to tint a texture object, hold T and click and that'll make a texture object, and then just select any texture from here. You could multiply it, which I'll show you how to do in a second, and now that would be your tint. A texture object is the same thing as if we dragged in a texture. I'm not sure about a shortcut on how to make this a parameter straight away, so you can just right click multiple and convert to parameters and then rename whatever you want, but the quickest way I know is holding T and click for a texture object. Now typically when you have a texture, you now want to adjust the tiling. So to do that, instead of typing texture coordinate, just hold U and click and that'll make a texture coordinate, and then to adjust the actual tiling of that, you will want to get a scalar parameter. So S and click like before, you could call it tiling, and then if you hold M and click, that'll now let you adjust the tiling of your texture, and then we can set the default to 1, and now you've got a parameter for your tiling. So again, super quick, just U, S, M, and then T, and now you've got your full setup. Another useful thing is you can right click on any input and promote it to a parameter. So right click any of these inputs or outputs, and then you can promote any of them to parameter and it'll give you the correct node that works with that. Now, for example, let's say this is your texture and you want to invert it. You'll typically use a 1 minus, or what you can do is hold O and click, and that'll be a shortcut for the 1 minus, and now you can quickly invert any texture just by holding O and left mouse button. Also, another very useful thing, especially when working with masks or grayscale maps for roughness, is right clicking and then start preview node. I've set mine up to a shortcut which is Control R. So if you want to do that, just go to the edit menu, editor preferences, and then just type in preview node, and then just set a hotkey for your preview node, and that'll work as a toggle. Every shortcut I mentioned in this video, I've put into a cheat sheet link down below just through my newsletter. I also send through weekly tips on Unreal Engine and 3D stuff in general, creative references, really good tutorials that I watch, anything I find that's interesting. It's super casual, easy to read. Link below. So as I mentioned before, M is for multiply, A can be used for add, D for divide, and there is not a subtract one because S is already taken by scalar parameter, but what you can do is right click, type in minus or the dash sign, and then hit enter, and that'll be a subtract node. Another shortcut if you have a numpad is if you right click, press the plus, that can be an add, a asterisk is a multiply, the slash is a divide, and the minus, like I mentioned, is a subtract. So that's another little quick shortcut. Another very common node is a linear interpolate. So if you hold L and click, that'll make a linear interpolate like this. Same thing. And then you can just plug your different inputs and then hold S and click for a parameter, call it blend, and then just plug that into alpha. So again, super quick, hold L and click for linear interpolate. If you want to quickly put a material function in your scene, you can hold F and click and then search for your material function. So I have an MF gradient, and that is a custom function I made that I can quickly add into my scene instead of looking for it in my content browser. Another common node is the component mask, so that you can mask out different channels in different combos. So a quick way to do that is hold Shift C. So I actually found this out by accident, but if you just press Shift C, it'll spawn that node. If you have a bunch of wires plugged into one node and you actually want to change the input, just hold Control and drag it into your other node. You can also hold Shift and drag it to the other node, and that also works. If you have a messy material graph and you want to easily see where your wires are going, if you just double click your node wire, that'll make a reroute node. And essentially this is just really easy to clean up your wiring and also make things easily legible, especially if you're working on a team. So for example, you could click one here and then add a second one here and then drag that up. so that you can easily tell where your wires are going into. So reroute nodes are super useful. If you're like me and you also want your node wires to be aligned sometimes, what you can do is select a bunch of nodes and press Q, and that'll straighten out the node wire in between all your selected nodes. If you also want to align all your nodes, just select all the ones you want, press Shift A, and that'll align it to the left, or if you press Shift D, that'll align it to the right. So very useful, especially when doing something like this and you just want to clean everything up, and then you can press Q to make sure they're all aligned up. Again, if you select them all, right click and go to alignment, there's a bunch of other options with their shortcuts, and you can also distribute them evenly. So do something like that and that'll distribute it evenly on the vertical axis. I'm trying to hit 10K subs before the end of the year, so like and subscribe if this was helpful. Let's say you have a bunch of nodes that you want to group and keep organized. Just select all of them, press C, and that'll make a comment box that you can then group, and then you could call it something like diffuse. If you then end up adding nodes around it that actually do matter and you want it to be included in this group, you can just drag the comment box over that, and now it'll also be added into that group. Another thing, while this comment box is selected, let's say you have a bunch of groups in your material graph and you want to have an overview of where everything is. While your comment box is selected, just select show bubble when zoomed, and now you can see the label of each of your comment boxes. You can also change the color and the name of all of them in this left details panel. Let's say you have a bunch of groups set up and you don't want to have to wire it all the way into the node because it'll mess up the wiring and the visuals of it. What you can do is drag out of your last node that you would typically plug into the parent material and just type named reroute, and then you can call this diffuse or whatever the name of your thing is, and this acts like a reference to everything else in your scene. So then you could add a named reroute for this, call it metallic, and then another named reroute, roughness. And now that you've set these reroutes up, you can now go here and just type in diffuse, and that acts as a reference. Right click again, you can also see all of them here, metallic, another right click, and then roughness, and these will act as references to all your other setups so that you can keep your material graph super clean. Now let's say you have a bunch of parameters in your material graph and you want to group them into their respective areas. What you can do is select all your related parameters, and then on the left details panel, make them give them a group. So for this one, I could call it 01 diffuse, and then I'll also shift select these guys, put them in the diffuse group. And now let's say you want them in a specific order. Let's say I want the tiling at the top. I'll leave my sort priority at 32. Then let's say I want to control the saturation second. I could put that number at 33, and then I want my tint addition to be 34, and then my tint multiply to be 35. And then if you hit save and open up your material instance, now all of those parameters will be in their own group, and they'll also be in the order that you specified depending on the number that you gave them in the sort priority box. Hopefully that was useful. The cheat sheet is linked down below, and this is something I wish I had when I was starting out. Definitely saves a lot of time when I'm making materials and I don't need to right click and type everything. And yeah, catch you guys in the next one. Peace.